You can't win today's game with yesterday's home runs. You have to actually lean into it today, and your fitness and your family, your faith. It's a daily practice, and giving opportunity for feedback because it's all small course corrections, right? I mean, we're out of balance, and we need some feedbacks to help us get in balance. And as long as we give people permission, we're open to it. That's how we become better at what we do.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Pursuit of Purpose. My name is Chris Kiefer, and I am here with Brad Pedersen, who is the co-founder of Pila and Lomi, two really awesome sustainable companies that we'll get into. But before we do that, first of all, Brad, thank you so much for coming on.
Chris, really excited to be here with you today, and really looking forward to our conversation together.
Yeah, and so I met Brad through Renee Warren, who you guys are, or it sounds like from what I've seen on other podcasts, you and the Martell family go back a little ways, and you guys are adventure buddies. Is that correct?
Yeah, Dan is one of my best buds, and we've definitely had a lot of adventures together. And most recently, even him moving to the Okanagan and British Columbia, where I live, and so just gave us more access and opportunity to go play together. So we have a lot of good memories we've created in the backcountry.
Are you in? Is it Kelowna? Is that the same city or nearby?
Yeah, that's right. Kelowna is the closest major city. I live just north of that in a small area called Lake Country, but it's, within 20 minutes. We're just kind of in the countryside, nestled between, as it would suggest by the name, lakes. There's a whole bunch of lakes around us.
Got it. I was gonna my geography of Canada is not great, but we went up to, I guess it would be Alberta, just south of Calgary. I'm trying to remember the name of this place that we went to. It was this really maybe it was near Lethbridge. It was the place itself, like it was like a venue for this wedding of a friend of mine. But the point that I was going to make is that, like, we live in North Idaho, not too far away from you, and we have mountains and stuff. But some of the photos that we took, and just like the views of the mountains there, that is like the definition of God's country. If I've ever, like, it is just, you can't, I genuinely feel like you can't go there and not be like, there is something bigger than me, There's a greater power that, like, it's just the epicness of nature and the beauty and everything. It just really hits you.
Yeah, I feel high gratitude for living in Canada. If you think about it from a luck perspective, the luckiest thing that happened, I was born in this incredible country that is full of abundance, and has the lowest population density of any country on the planet. So there's a lot of country, not a lot of people, 10% of the US population there. And actually, an interesting fact is that 80% of the Canadian population live within 1 hour of the US border. So we're all kind of really low down when you think of the country and how big it is and how far wide it goes and how high it is. Most people live just in a band very close to the US border. So there's a whole lot of area that is untapped, just incredible. Like you say, God's country, just vast wilderness.
Yeah, I remember it. It's called Pincher Creek. Have you ever heard of that place?
I do know that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, like, kind of, like, I feel like difficult to get to is probably most of Canada, except for the major cities. But an awesome trip. So one of the things I wanted to dive into was, you've started seven. I saw 7 companies. Is the Pila and Lomi, is that 8 and 9, or is that part of the 7?
Well, they used to be one company, but we just split them out. So that's actually technically 7 and 8 that I've been a part of co-founding. So yes, I have other things that I've been involved in, I've invested in as an angel investor, but in terms of things that I've founded and kicked off from scratch, there's been 8 adventures that I've participated in so far.
And I would say that, at least for me, because this was a pretty, like, potentially because of my past in the marketing agency, we would get asked to create Kickstarter videos for companies. And so I was very deep in the world of, like, what good Kickstarters videos existed and whatnot. And I feel like that's how I came across this Lomi product. But I think this is just, before we get into, like, the learnings of these entrepreneurial things, I just would love for you to tell us, what is Lomi and Pila, and where did that come from? Obviously, it was the result of this successful, is it the most successful Kickstarter, or one of the most?
Yeah, so we used Indiegogo, so crowdfunding as a category. We were the largest clean tech crowdfunding campaign of all time, the largest campaign of 2023. So yeah, it was an unusual outcome relative to what typically happens there.
That's awesome. So tell us, what is the product and where was the like idea for this? Where did it come from?
So let me just take a step back in time and give you sort of a sense of my background to make sense of why those two businesses exist. So for close to 30 years, I was a toy maker. I made kids playthings, and in that process and through those adventures, I shipped billions of pieces of plastic around the planet. And I always felt somewhat conflicted about the fact that I knew that the majority of toys end up within landfill within 90 days. And most people are kind of like, what? That's crazy, right? My Barbie or my Tonka truck, that doesn't seem to be the case. But yeah, those things would last longer. But if you think about it, the vast majority of toys are, impulse toys, things that are near the counter that are in a surprise capsule or egg or something like that. And you take the toy out, you play with it. Typically, it breaks within a period of time, ends up in the garbage can, goes to landfill. So that is where a whole bunch of the toys I used to make went, and certainly a number of other brands that are in the industry. That's what happens, and that's the end of life. And it kind of speaks to the broader idea of just consumerism, that we live in this economy of make, take, use, waste, very linear. And there's not a lot of end of life thought into the beginning. At least that's the way it's been for, call it, the last 50, 60 years. So when I left the toy business and had an opportunity to start again, and I'd found freedom in that transition, I wanted to kind of redefine, what I wanted to do when I grew up. I've been a big kid my entire life, hence I was in the toy business. And I kind of landed on three principles. The first was life plan before business plan. In the past, I had worked as my priority. And, while I espoused that my family is important, or my faith was important, or my fitness is important, if you looked at my calendar, all you knew is that my finances were the most important thing. That's where I was spending the most of my time. And where you spend your time is what you value. So I was out of integrity with what I was saying versus what I was doing. So that was number one. Number two was only awesome people. I'd come through some business partnerships that weren't great. And I've come to learn that the two most important decisions you'll make in your life is who do you marry and who you get in business with, and make those decisions very carefully because it'll affect the quality of your life if you make it right or wrong. So that was number two. And then number three was only impact. I only want to invest my agency into things that ultimately could be impactful, and just bring more joyful purpose to my life. So that led me kind of with those constraints in mind to sort of look through a lens of like, what are the business opportunities that potentially I could get involved in that would allow me to apply these three things. And
And sorry to recap, the three things are, I was trying to write these down. The value, where you spend your time is what you value. The third one was impact. And what's the succinct way to say who you marry and what you do business with?
only awesome people.
Only awesome people. Okay. So the first one was the tagline is
Life plan before business plan.
life plan. Got
Second one, no asshole rule. That's easy to remember. Third
it.
one, only impact. So that is basically the filter by looking at opportunities. Um, so I was in a business forum with Matt Bertulli, who owned a digital agency in Toronto, and actually one of the largest in Canada and the world. Very gifted marketer. And he had invested into a startup called Pila. And Pila was the world's first compostable phone case. And it was founded by an entrepreneur from Saskatchewan named Jeremy Lang. And he'd come up with this material that had this incredible compostable, biodegradable qualities. And he had applied it first to phone cases. And that just happened to be a really lucky thing. I don't think he knew just how big the market was. Like phone cases, there's $20 billion worth of those sold every single year. So it's a huge market. Kind of makes sense because if you think about it, Apple phones, they always have a new model every year, and most people are trading in their devices every 2 to 3 years. And when they trade them in,
So the phone case
they
way. I just went through that process. Yeah.
new phone case, right? The one you had before doesn't fit onto the one you're
It's
getting,
even
so you get a
interesting
new phone.
because before, like, I'm just remembering my first phone, the flip phone, or the like LG phones, cases, like they kind of had cases, but they weren't like an essential component, you know? And
Yeah,
now it's like, I mean, the number of people that I know that don't have a case on their phone is like, it's like almost awkward. It's like, oh, did you like just get your phone and you're waiting? Like, why do you not have a case on your phone? You know, they're so delicate. So yeah, phone cases are huge.
it's a significant business, and But the problem is that they're made out of this incredibly resilient material. Like plastic, we're not anti-plastic. It's just that we've gone from making things with plastic that have this very long enduring timeline into things that we consume quickly. Like single use is abuse, right? Like using plastic for spoons and cups and that, it just, if we use it once, throw it away, that is not responsible. So Jeremy applied the material to phone cases. Also, it's a business that had enough margin because these new materials were more expensive than traditional polymers. And he had built it and had gotten product market fit, but he just didn't have the ability to scale it. And so Matt had come in as the first investor, and Matt was frustrated because now he was growing awareness and creating demand, but they didn't know how to increase production and scale it. And of course, with my experience in being a toy maker, where I've literally, like I said, shipped billions of pieces of plastic around the planet, it was the perfect opportunity for me to apply my agency. And the good news is that Matt, Jeremy, and we went through a really thorough process up front to be able to ensure that we were good matches for each other, that weren't going to like step on each other's toes, and that we were going to complement each other's weaknesses versus compete with each other, which I also think is a really important thing when you're thinking about a business partnership. So that was how this got started. And as we were selling millions of pieces of Pila cases into the world, we started to run into a new problem, which is how do we give these things the end of life they deserve? In other words, they do break down, they do compost, but most people don't have access to a home composter and or an industrial composter that actually takes compostable plastics. And so we would get people actually shipping their Pila cases back to us and saying, "Hey, you look after it." And we were like, "Well, just take it to a composting facility. Like, that's what you do." But we really quickly found out that that's not that was not readily available. So
So I have a quick question on that. This is a stupid one, but this is just my lack of knowledge in the composting world. If I have a compostable phone, why can't I just put it in the garbage? What's the like? Isn't it going to compost in the landfill?
that's such a great question, and it's probably the number one misunderstanding of just organic matter in general. At least it was for me. Like the idea, hey, I take my organic things, I put them into the landfill, and they break down there, and that's responsible, right? The problem is typically they go into a plastic bag that then goes to a landfill where they cover it with clay or dirt. And so it breaks down anaerobically. So instead of generating emissions that are helpful, it creates emissions that are harmful. So it generates methane gas, which is up to 80 times more potent than CO2. And then it also produces something called leachate, which leachate seeps into the water system and corrupts it. So it's it's I think probably one of the greatest misunderstandings, because let's face it, most people don't think about their garbage. Their garbage is something they put into a bin and then it goes away, and they don't want to think about it. Quite frankly, that's just kind of like, hey, it's a problem that was solved because it's no longer there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try and if I'm tracking with you, this is super like this is crazy. I've never it's never crossed my mind before. But you're saying that not only for phone cases, but like a banana peel or anything that is compostable, if it goes into the ground and if the I'm just tracking the words anaerobic, so there's no oxygen in the breakdown process, that makes a worse byproduct than if you were oxygenating your compost and turning it and in your own house or your piece of land that you own. That's going to be a much it's I because I've always thought what's the like people talking about composting, it's like, I mean, we live in Idaho, garbage isn't really a problem, like no one talks about it like they do in Seattle, where there's just like, where do we put all of this, and so I've thought that if I take a banana peel and put it in the garbage and then put that in the garbage and the can and they take it in the garbage truck, what's the difference between that and my backyard? And you're saying that it literally is going to decompose and create a different byproduct by doing the first as opposed to doing it in your house.
You've said it very well, and quite frankly, it is the greatest misunderstanding. Most people don't know that that is it, and I didn't know that. And the problem we were trying to solve is how do we give our compostable phone cases the end of life? And as we were solving that problem, we realized that actually this is not just for our compostable products. This is for all organic waste, so food waste as well. And everything you just said, we came to this understanding that when you take organics and put them in the landfill and they break down anaerobically, that's harmful, not helpful. And that really what we should be doing is breaking it down with an oxygenated environment with the right microbes, the right humidity. And then the output does two things. Number one, it becomes a regenerative supplement for the soil. And that's something that we actually need more of on the planet. And the second thing is it's a decarbonizer. Not only by diverting the methane gases, like that you do displace it, but the output itself actually sequesters carbon from the atmosphere. In fact, Lomi is going to be a carbon asset within this calendar year. And we truly believe that we've built the most scalable carbon capture solution on the planet today. So, look, you asked about the crowdfunding campaign, and we're kind of going down the
Yeah,
circuitous
yeah.
path. But the point is that we decided to just, can we get proof of concept? Would people support something like this, particularly at this price point? Because it's $500. It's not cheap. So we put together this crowdfunding campaign. I've done crowdfunding campaigns in the past. It sounds like you've got experience there. They're hard. They require a lot of time and investment and effort. And what I've come to learn is that if you do like six figures, that's pretty extraordinary. As a point of comparison, Peloton, when they launched their initial product on a crowdfunding campaign, I think it raised about $250,000. So that know where they are today. If you do seven figures, that's really extraordinary. And if you do eight figures, that's like unbelievable. You're a unicorn. And so we launched it. We did great storytelling, which is really the key to why that works so well. Matt's opening line, what if you could change the world with a push of a button? It just resonated with people. They understood that, the simplicity of this thing in my home actually not only eliminates the mess and the smell and all the things we don't love about food waste, pests, rats, raccoons, that kind of stuff, but also is an incredibly healthy thing and positive, simple thing we can all do to support a healthier planet and help reverse climate change. And it just resonated, and people showed up and voted with their wallets, and you already know the outcome. So it was incredibly, yeah, it's incredibly successful. And then we've since, so we did the crowdfunding campaign April 2021. Like I said, raised just under $10 million worth of support. And since that time, we've shipped almost 200,000 units into the market. So just over 18 months.
That's awesome. Um, and so, yeah, that I'm curious how, and you kind of touched on this, but I would love to go deeper into you, or I saw in your bio that you have 7 times faith-based founder. So talk to me a little bit about what does that mean? I'm assuming that your this probably ties into your new 3 rules that you live by, but you probably didn't always have those, but maybe you always had the faith lens, or how has that evolved in your journey?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And it's something that I would say is evolving. I haven't arrived. I'm a work in progress. But I do feel like I've had enough experience, enough reps that I've figured a few things out. Look, I grew up in a home that I had incredible support from my parents. My parents were, they went to church, they were believers. So I think I had good role models in terms of the way they live their life. But I also didn't want to take anything at sort of face value. I wanted it to be real for me. In fact, I think it's Scott Peck had said that there's nothing more dangerous than hand-me-down religion. If you just believe something because your parents believed it, that is not really a great way to build a foundation of support. It has to be something that you really own on your own. And so at 17, I had finished up high school, and I was getting ready to go to chiropractic college, but I decided I wanted to take a break and just maybe do some traveling. And my father had suggested, hey, check out this organization called YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission, and check it out and see what you think. So I went online, I did a little research, and um, I don't think I did it online. Whatever, I did research because I don't think the internet was even a thing then. It was a thing, but not much of a thing.
Yeah.
But I did some research, and I was like, this sounds interesting because I'm not just traveling. This is going to be allowing me to do things that actually make impact. And I was curious about that. So I wanted to do it. And it's kind of cool because you go and do something called a DTS where they train you up. And then you don't even know where you're going to go, but you're doing outreach somewhere in the world. Uh, we ended up going to Jamaica, and at first I'm like, "Yay! Kid from the prairies gets to go to this really cool exotic island, and this is gonna be amazing." And I'm gonna be surfing and on the beach, and how awesome this is gonna be. And then I found out we were going to Kingston, Jamaica, and Mandeville, Jamaica, which is on the south end of the island. And at that time, Kingston had the second highest murder rate in the world. Anyways, it was definitely a different experience than what you could imagine based upon where we were and the people we were going to be meeting with. But three things came away from that experience. Number one was um, just how incredibly fortunate, blessed I was to be born in Canada, and that we all should be to be born in these Western countries where we just take for granted our safety and food security and shelter. And, you know, when you go to developing countries and you see firsthand how most of the world lives, it's really eye-opening. So that was the kind of the first like, wow, this was like first time I've kind of been out of Kansas. It was like, this is an eye-opener, right? The second thing was living in faith. I'd heard about it, you read about it, but actually, when you see, and what is faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And when you actually truly live in a place where you don't know exactly, you know, where you're going to be staying, where your meals are going to come from, it relies you to rely on a higher power to guide what's happening. It's pretty incredible. And I saw things that just you couldn't explain outside of just miracles. It was just so formative to how I was looking at the world, and that yes, I have agency, I have the ability to make things happen, but there is forces at play that are beyond me that you know are helping amplify any of my activities. And then third was this sort of soulful satisfaction that came from giving. When you lean into other people and are able to invest into them time and effort and your agency and resources in a meaningful way, and you can see in their eyes that you made a difference, and there's no way that they could ever repay you for what you did. There's nothing that you could ever buy or own that would ever give you the same soulful satisfaction. So at 17, those three things, I came back from that experience, and um, they never really left me. They became kind of grounding anchors in terms of the way that I was looking at the world and the way that I would then go forward. And I always had this entrepreneurial tendency, but I would say that I also felt somewhat conflicted or maybe even convicted that, you know, if I wasn't doing anything other than, you know, God's work, it was less than. Like you're not actually in the church. If you're an entrepreneur, you're kind of like, I'm not sure you're a bit of a risk taker, and you seem to be preoccupied with money. Therefore, you know, you're less than others. And there was a long period of time that I almost had a little bit of guilt and a little bit of shame about the fact that I wasn't doing things that were honoring, you know, the kingdom of heaven in the way that I was showing up. Um, but I have come to learn, and by the way, there's a couple books that I read that were really helpful. One was Tim Keller's Every Good Endeavor, and the other is Called to Create. And Erwin of McManus, he also talks a lot about this, that everything that we do has got eternal consequences, and that we were actually, from the beginning of time, called to be creators in God's economy. That all of us have different gifts and different talents, and our talents have been gifted to us in order to build value into people on the planet. So, you know, there used to be like 700 different rules and commandments that if you go through the Old Testament that people were supposed to lean into. And Jesus summarized it in two: love God, love people. And if you think about it, you know, how do we love God? Well, we start by loving this planet, this garden that He gave us, this gift that He asked us to co-create in, to not only be, not to be the takers, but instead to be the caretakers. We're really good at taking, and we are very poor at caretaking. And secondly, is by doing that, also loving the people that are around us. And so as I look at it, I think business has the potential to be the greatest force for good, to do and serve those two things. And so I really feel more empowered and compelled than ever before that these enterprises are a force for good. And through delivering excellence and value and helping build value into God's economy and into the lives of people, that I'm really living in service and aligned with what He wants for our world and our humanity.
I love that. I was just to take you where my head's at. It seems similar. I when I was in college, so I'd gotten engaged to. This is a personal story that I've never shared publicly on a podcast, but I was engaged to Natalie, and I told, or I sorry, but when we started dating, early, like within a month of dating, I told Natalie that I had always had this thought, maybe I'm supposed to be a priest. And I was like, should I, like, I didn't know if I was going to do that or not, but I didn't want to, like, I wanted to make sure she wasn't blindsided if a year later I was like, hey, so it was a thing that we talked about frequently. But I remember very similar to what you're describing. I had this thought of like, I can be a priest, which is like the best thing that a human could do. This was the perception. Or I could do like be a dad and have, take a normal job, but you're not really like a saint worthy person in that situation. You're like, you could be a good guy, but it's like, if you really wanted to follow God's will, go do that. And that was something that who knows where that came from. It's not like my parents said that, but I remember I was growing up, and I think I remember you saying you were told you were going to be a chiropractor. And me growing up, it was like, Chris is going to be an engineer. He's going to be an engineer, going to be an engineer. Like, I liked Legos and building with stuff, and people just said that constantly. So when I went to college, it was like, oh, I guess I'm going to be an engineer. And I went to my first engineering job after college, and it was like the whole world just was like just it was scary because I was like, oh no, like I'm on this path to be an engineer. It doesn't look fun. That guy doesn't look like he loves his job. And this is what I'm debating. Do I, because I was engaged at this point, do I get married and be an engineer, or I have like 3 months to say, never mind, Natalie, I'm out. I'm gonna go be a priest, because engineering was like so, it wasn't right for me. And I didn't realize that there was like another path of being a good, faithful person. And I didn't, I still, this is the first time, and I love the frames that you're putting on entrepreneurship of just really leaning into creating and co-creating with God in all of this. And that's, I don't know, that's a very exciting, or it resonates strongly with me, because I feel like it's not like I am definitely not in the same place I was 12 years ago, but it's still something that I think like, how am I, like some of the things that I want to ask you is a lot of this stuff, like the composting or going and serving in other countries. I feel like there's the voice in my head that's like, you're like, how are you actually going to make an impact? Like you're one person. I'm curious if you have these thoughts. Obviously, as the machine starts gaining legs and you're shipping hundreds of thousands of these, you're like, oh, okay, we actually could make a difference. But there's that piece of like, how are you actually going to change the amount of plastic that is just dumped into landfills? That's the voice saying to me, not to you. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you're just one person. You're not going to change the other 50,000 people in Coeur d'Alene that aren't going to do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know who John Newton is?
No.
So I'll tell you a quick story and it'll make sense. So John Newton was a sailor in the slave trade, and he was conflicted about it. He felt guilty about it, but it was a way to make a living. And he was off the coast of Ireland, got caught up in a storm. And at that moment, he got on his knees and he prayed to God. He said, if you save me from this storm, if I survive, I will commit the rest of my life to working to abolish the slave trade. He survived, and true to his word, he went back to London and he started publishing documents on the slave trade and the atrocities and everything he'd seen. He teamed up with William Wilberforce, and together, within just a few years of him passing, they actually were able to abolish the slave trade in the British Empire. And while most people may not know that story, they forever know him for the hymn he wrote, Amazing Grace. And so when you think about the hymn and the words, particularly when he talks about a wretch like me, you can maybe understand where he was coming from because he felt so conflicted about what he was,
And yeah, part of that industry.
yeah, just being in an industry. And so, look, I kind of look at my experience similar. Okay, so, making toys is not the same as trading humans, but to the extent that, I have shipped a bunch of plastic things, and again, all in the spirit of putting smiles on kids' faces, knowing that the end of life was not in integrity with a circular economy or regenerative economy, there's some conflict with that. And the greatest threat to our planet is not, nuclear war or the conflicts that are happening in the Middle East or, you know, the next, COVID outbreak. The greatest threat to our planet is the false belief that somebody else is going to solve our problems. We have to be willing to lean in and take action to make the change possible. Because while, John Newton didn't understand at the time the work he was doing, today he was a part of the series of steps that allowed us to get to a place where we actually have, the planet has progressed to a much better uh, place for civilization, quite frankly. And look, I think entrepreneurialism is an opportunity to express yourself and your talents in a way that makes meaningful change. And I hope the work that I do today is going to make impact to generations beyond me. I don't know that for certain. And it's certainly not hubris. I don't care if they remember my name, but hopefully, I talk about the kids are arrows in my quiver that I'm firing into a future I'll never see. So hopefully, to their kids, those arrows that are shot into a distant future, that they see the impact of the work that I'm doing here today. And, it starts with awareness, because here's the thing, we're all just kind of becoming aware that plastic pollution is a problem. That's really only within the last, call it 10 years, that there's suddenly a general awareness of that. Now there's awareness of food waste going to landfill is not a great thing. That awareness is helping create positive change towards it. Just think, at one time we used to power a large part of the world with whale oil and bat poop, which is kind of crazy, right? You think about it now, and go, how did how did we get to such a crazy idea to do such, mindless ways of creating energy? But that's what we knew at the time. But through awareness, we said that this is not sustainable, or there was a better path in the way of using coal, and then that led to petroleum. And now we're aware that, hey, there's consequences to that. So we're waking up to wind and solar and all kinds of other opportunities. So its first step is awareness, and then the ability to lean into it, use our entrepreneurial gifts, our God given talents to be able to then make change, make momentum that hopefully impacts within your lifetime, but hopefully even beyond your lifetime in a way that continues to build value for both people and the planet.
So I have an interesting, and again, these are just like the personal voices in my head that I'm bringing up. When did you realize, or maybe there's a series of like breakthroughs of you're born and you're like, okay, this voice tells you you're going to be a chiropractor, and then you go on this mission, and then you start some companies. But I feel like something that I have witnessed other people talk about. I've maybe had a couple of these moments of just realizing I'm actually capable of so much more than I thought I was. And I'm curious if you have identified any moments in your journey where there was this expansive, or the expansion of what your vision or goal or whatever is. And I have a follow up to that, but I'm curious if where you want to take that.
Yeah. Well, let's just be clear that I've typically stumbled on those by a series of happy accidents of through events that I largely did not want to go through. So I've come to learn that success is not a very good teacher. We tend to learn from failing, and we tend to learn from mistakes, because when you fail and you make a mistake, it actually stops you. It forces you to reflect and then unpack, learn, and then try again. If you choose, you could choose also not to do that and be a victim and say, okay, I give up. And that makes you a failure, where, you get knocked down and then stay down. But I went through, bankruptcy not once, but three times. And all three of those were forcing functions of stopping, uh, learning, unpacking, learning, choosing again. And I found that, it's hard to figure out what you want in life. It's much easier to figure out what you don't want. So every time I would basically, look at the anti goals through the problems that I'd gone through in business and say, okay, I never want to have these things happen again. And that became the foundation for building a new business model that was better. And so this is, to answer your question, on the other side of my failings was a better version of myself. There was purpose to my pain, and ultimately a better business opportunity that I wouldn't have found if I had been successful and just continue to kind of roll through life in that initial model. And while I'm not suggesting people need to be masochists and go blow up their lives and look for pain, look at the struggles that you're going through and how you can build strength, and how you can take your pain and turn to something that's purposefully better for you. And I've had, like I said, a few adversities. Got fired from a company I co-founded. Another not awesome experience in the moment, but on the other side of that, freed me up to a better future that gave me new options and infinitely better life plan that I never saw. and would never have saw if I just continue to be successful and just continue to kind of roll along in that. So I'm just a big believer that, this is the whole idea of faith.
So, but I definitely hear what you're saying. I want to probe deeper into like, but you had, I'm assuming, a personal belief of what you were capable of. And that has to change as you, like, you don't co found or have success in Lomi or Pila if you're a small minded leader that can't paint a vision of like, I guess that's the thing is like, saying that here's my great mission for our company, come join me, follow me, let's go change the world and change composting. That doesn't, like, if you don't have the belief that it's possible, people are going to see that and they're like, I'm not doing that. But it's almost like courage, faith, and then just like a little bit of ego, I think, of just like, no, I can't, like, we can do this, let's go, like, we got this. But that doesn't, I'm assuming that 17-year-old Brad didn't have that. So where does that come from?
Yeah, look, I agree. 17-year-old Brad was naive, and maybe to my benefit that I was just kind of, it's something I actually call grit luck, where you just don't give up. You just keep going and going and going because even though it's the idea that when the going gets tough, the tough get going. I just keep leaning into the opportunity and trying to unpack it. So I think at an early age, I did have some characteristics that helped me because I was resilient. I was a person who wanted to work hard and I wanted to perform. I grew up in a family where my dad had instilled a work ethic into me that was hard work was important. And in fact, if it wasn't hard, it didn't really even count. He was expecting me to work hard, and that's how I earned respect from him. So I think that was helpful, and I think that was, the beginning foundation. But as you move along, you start to understand that actually, we as founders, entrepreneurs, are responsible for creating a future that other people can't see. We are vision casters. We travel in time into the future, imagine what it could look like, and then come back and create it. Like when you set up a business plan for a year, that's literally what you're doing. You're time traveling to the future and saying, "This is what I expect on the other side of this period of time," and then you come back and you put the steps in place to make that so. And along the way, you're probably pivoting and changing and being nimble and all that kind of good stuff. But we are, this is part of what's unique about our humanity is that we have this incredible ability to imagine a different future and then to create hopeful ways of actually actualizing on that and creating a being. And if you have a basis of faith that you believe all work is eternal, if you believe that you're a spiritual being having a physical experience, then that's kind of a base foundation. Okay, this is a part of the overall plan for my existence in life and beyond. Therefore, everything I'm doing today has eternal consequences. And if that's true, then I have lots to hope for. And I think, quite frankly, I think Christians should be some of the most innovative and risk-taking people on the planet because they understand the end game. They understand what it's about. So they should be leaning into this, knowing that if we're in integrity with what we're called to do, that ultimately we have a higher power that's empowering our ability to make impact.
Love that. So I'm assuming that could be a great transition into the new book that you have coming out, Startup Santa. Is that what it's called?
That is the name, Startup Santa.
And you, I assume, are the Santa, right? In this, that is was it your nickname or like people called you that at some point with the toy company?
Well, no, I didn't ever get called Santa. The title is sort of cheeky that, I've done several startups and I was in the kids space for almost 30 years and I'm the real Santa Claus. If there's anybody who could be close to him, I am him because most people know that Santa is from the North and we're Canadians, so we're the closest to him. And,
Got it.
every
And toys.
morning every Christmas morning, I was putting joy and happiness under the tree. So yes, that is where the
That's the
title comes
title.
from.
Yep. Now let's go deeper into the book.
Yeah. So look, the book, it's a toy maker's tale of 10 business lessons learned through timeless toys. And, I actually didn't want to write this book. The original idea was I was going to do a memoir. And part of it was that there was just a whole lot of things that happened in my life that I just felt like, okay, I need to like write some of this down just so I don't forget it. Because our minds are really good at coming up with ideas, but retaining information tends to be kind of a leaky thing. Um, and furthermore, I was also thought the world is kind of noisy. It doesn't need more content out there. So I started writing a memoir. And then as I started writing, ideas started to come about. And actually, I found out that I actually write figure out what I think and how I think about ideas and correlate ideas. And it just started to come together. And the final sort of iteration was like, look, I've got a whole bunch of life lessons, mostly from things that I did wrong. So, this, I tell people, it's not a to do book, it's a what not to do, because here's a bunch of mistakes I made in building companies. And taking those lessons and tying it to toys. So, iconic toys that you would know about. And why toys? Well, toys are a facilitator of play and they help us, just become human. Like they teach us how to be creative, how to interact, and how to solve problems. And so behind every toy, there are lessons to be learned that some of them may not be even obvious. Like I talk about Jenga as an example that, there's foundational blocks and there's flexible blocks. Like there's certain blocks, if you pull out, the whole thing falls, and there's other blocks you can move and it's no problem. Well, that was a perfect analogy to talk about in your life. You've got values of like faith, family, fitness, finances, those things. You can't have those fall because if you do, the entire structure falls. But things like fun and friends and refinement or pursuing acts of freedom, those have the ability to be flexible. You can pick and choose when you do that and how often you do it. So every chapter takes a toy, unpacks some of the history, and then just some maybe not so obvious or obvious lessons that can be learned that I then tie to stories along my journey as being a toy maker.
That's awesome. I was gonna say Jenga. That's first of all, that's the first game that Natalie I like on our first mini date. Natalie and I played Jenga, but on the iPad Jenga. It was really like novel back then. They just, I think it was literally the first or second iPad where you like you spin the Jenga tower around to get it oriented and stuff. But I love the analogy also. Like you want to have your Jenga game end quickly, just have one block at the bottom, have a foundation of one thing instead of your three or four values. You know what I mean? Like you have one little thing that everything's teetering on, it's all out of balance. Your game's going to be over pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know you could actually play Jenga on a smart device. That's the first I've ever heard of that. But
It's not, I mean, there's definitely it's less, there's not as the big, having it physically there and tumble over definitely does not quite the same on an iPad. But anyway, so that sounds awesome. And where can people find this? Is it where would a listener go buy this? Is it on all the regular places?
yeah, we've so it launches next week, so first week in November, and you can find it in all the usual places, Amazon, Apple Books. We have an audiobook as well, so if you like to listen to books versus read them, that's going to be available as well. But if you want to learn more about the book, you go to startupsantabook.com, and actually you can download the first chapter for free. Plus, I did some videos with one of my spiritual mentors, and there's opportunities for you to kind of go behind the scenes and learn more and even go deeper in terms of some of the lessons that we unpack in the book.
Awesome. I love that. Um, on the topic of books, I always ask all my guests, what three book recommendations do you have for the audience?
Look, I first of all, I would say that for me, books are prescriptive. It's like, what do you want to get value from the book, versus, just a book. So I tell people, if you tell me you want to learn about personal development, if you want to learn about how to be a better leader, then there's different books for that. But for me, the books that have made the biggest impact in my life, number one, the Bible. Number two, Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller, which I would highly encourage to anybody who's a founder, business owner, or just a leader in the marketplace, quite frankly, who, maybe has a little bit of uncertainty about what is my role in God's economy. I think it's extremely helpful. And then, look, I would say the third book is probably The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. It's just a no nonsense guide to what it takes to actually create success. It turns out there are no silver bullets. There is no fast lane to become successful. It's just small decisions consistently executed over time that compound into big results, both good and bad. You choosing not to do it or choosing to do it. So yeah, those would be the top three that have made impact on me.
Love those. I haven't heard of the Darren or the is Darren Hardy you said for the Compound Guide.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. Um, and last question, favorite movie?
I top of my head, it's gonna be Gladiator. But I kind of feel like I came out of a generation of these big, epic, iconic films that told these stories of hero's journey. Um, so I love Gladiator, even though it's fiction, loosely based on history. But I just love the hero's journey story in that. In fact, I have the helmet in my office because I think it's kind of a great reminder of just the the blood, sweat, and tears of trying to go through to meet your ultimate purpose in life. And but I also think that during that my generation, there was Braveheart, there was Saving Private Ryan, there so many great movies. A river runs through it, but definitely Gladiator would be the top of my list.
I just while I was looking this up on IMDb, I realized that did you know there's a second Gladiator coming out next year? Gladiator 2,
I had no idea.
and it looks like Russell Crowe is going to be in it again. I
Really?
was like I just was pulling it up to link this. But anyways, so if you're a Gladiator fan, which I definitely am, looks like they next year some point there's another one coming. Um, well, Brad, this was a super fun conversation. This is just a random. I'm curious because we've got a couple more minutes. This little icing on the cake. The thing that you said about where you spend your time is what you value. If I said that correctly, I'm curious. Have you ever? Well, first of all, I'm assuming you have kids, right? Have you asked them how for feedback on how your time like allocation is going, or your wife, or who do you turn to like, hey, am I in alignment with what I say I will want?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question. I actually talk about this in my book, and the answer is yes to both my kids and my wife. I would say that's a recent history for me with some of my learnings. My kids are adults; they're in their mid 20s. But one of the things I talk about, as I said, the two most important decisions you make is who do you marry, who you get in business with, and get those right because your quality of life will be tremendously impacted on that. I've been very blessed. My wife is an amazing life partner, and two practices we have every week. Every Wednesday we have a date night, and it's meant to be just fun and cracking a bottle of wine and having dinner. And we kind of surprise each other, and it's just light conversation. But then every Sunday we go for a walk and we do a review of the week. And the way that we do that review is we personally self-assess how we showed up that week as a husband, father, lover, and provider. And her provider becomes caretaker or homemaker. And like what worked, what didn't work, what do we think about the week ahead, and then we give the other person an opportunity to either agree with it or provide feedback. And I think it's important to provide those opportunities to communicate because I've come to learn that relationships don't get poor overnight. They just gradually drift because of neglect. And so love takes work, relationships take work. You got to lean into it and be, proactive and work it to make it work.
Yeah. The one thing that made me think of when you said that is so I have a almost six, 4, 2, and how old is she now? 8 weeks old. So we got 4 kids, and my oldest is Ellie is her name. I asked her this question. I love asking like really difficult or like deep questions to little kids just to see because it blows your mind like how good their responses are sometimes. But one of the questions I asked was, "Hey Ellie, how do you or like what do you think is important to me?" And a 5-year old, this is her response, and she's like, "Um, I think that your phone's pretty important." And I was like, "How do you know that?" And she's like, "Well, because you look at it a lot." And I was just like, "Oh, like duh, like just like if you stop and have those conversations, regardless of the age, you have a 5-year old just like slap you in the face lovingly, which she's just curious, like she's just completely observing and just stating what she's seeing, and it's like, okay, like yes, that's a great point and a good reminder, and it's like my wife is over there like I've tried to been telling you, whatever, and like doesn't if Natalie tells me that's I'm not taking that, but when your 5-year old just is observing, it's pretty humbling and a huge blessing to be reminded of that. So I just love the idea. I like that, the date night and the walk. That's a fantastic idea for just reviewing the week. And I do think I completely agree with you that it's like, it sounds like that compound guide that you mentioned. There's probably, just from what you said, similarities that it's not like you say I love you once and you're good. It's the good relationships have check-ins, and just it's like the reps. Are you doing your reps every day? If you stop lifting, you can't just say, well, I lifted a lot when I was 20. Where'd my strength go?
You can't win today's game with yesterday's home runs. You have to actually lean into it today, and your fitness and your family, your faith. It's a daily practice, and giving opportunity for feedback, because it's all small course corrections, right? I mean, we're out of balance, and we need some feedbacks to help us get in balance. And as long as we give people permission, we're open to it. That's how we become better at what we do.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brad. It was a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to come on here and share wisdom. And for those of you, I almost forgot, how would you like people to connect with you?
You can go to my website, bradpedersen.com, and that's spelled with all E's as in echo and D as in delta, because most people don't get it right. They spell it with other letters. So
S-E-N at the end.
S-E-N. Yes, that's right.
S-E-N. Awesome. Well, great, Brad. Thank you so much. And we will see you around.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the time today.
Thank you for your attention and listening to this episode of The Pursuit of Purpose. Your feedback and comments mean the world to me. If you liked what you heard, please take a second, leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. If you've got suggestions for future episodes or just want to say hi, shoot me an email at chris@chriskiefer.com. Don't forget, I make it a point to include all the links to the books, movies, and resources mentioned on this episode in the show notes. You can see those directly below in the description or on my website, chriskiefer.com. Thanks so much, guys.